Have you ever had that nagging sense that something is off in your life? A vague feeling that no matter how determined you are, something drags you back to the same slip-ups and the same disappointments? You promise yourself you will get things right this time, yet it all unravels the moment you need to push through. Maybe it is that small voice in your head that knows exactly when to whisper, "Give up, it will never work," just as you are about to make a breakthrough. Or the flash of anger that explodes from nowhere over a minor remark, leaving you stunned afterward, because deep down, you know the incident was not worth that reaction. It might be the jealousy you keep denying, the tight knot in your stomach when someone else reaches a goal you also dream about. Perhaps it is the heavy fear of failing that convinces you to build excuses, scroll your phone, or rearrange your desk instead of starting the project that could change everything. None of these patterns are random. They come from a hidden pocket of the mind that silently defines what you believe you deserve, how you see other people, and which paths you allow yourself to follow. Carl Jung called that hidden pocket the shadow, the secret side of the personality that carries every desire you repressed, every weakness you tried to forget, every shameful memory you tucked away so the world would accept you. We all push those parts aside for different reasons. Maybe parents told us certain feelings were wrong. Maybe teachers rewarded us only when we fit the mold, or friends laughed at traits that made us stand out. Whatever the reason, those feelings never vanished. They slid below the surface and have been shaping your reactions ever since. Here is the problem. Whatever you push away does not lose power when you stop looking at it. On the contrary, the less attention you give your shadow, the more freedom it has to stir trouble behind the scenes. It waits until a stressful day, then it snaps at a friend. It shows up when you are close to finishing an important task, then floods you with doubt until you miss the deadline. It clouds your thinking whenever you judge another person harshly, making you project your own unwanted qualities onto them so you never have to notice those traits in yourself. It guides you to fail on purpose, then convinces you that failing proves you are not good enough to try. Jung warned us with a single line, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That sentence is not poetry, it is a plain statement of how the mind works. If you do not acknowledge your shadow, it will keep writing the story for you while you tell yourself everything just happens by chance. The alternative is difficult but liberating. If you dare to look inward at the traits you dislike, if you allow yourself to feel the feelings you once labeled unwanted, you can turn that buried energy into genuine strength. The process is not comfortable, yet it is the only route to break the cycle of self-sabotage and claim genuine control over what you do next. Think back to childhood. From the moment you could understand words, you were taught which emotions were good and which ones should be hidden. Maybe you can still recall someone saying, "Stop crying, don't be weak," or "Good people don't get angry," or "Share everything, don't be selfish." Bit by bit, entire pieces of your real self were pressed down. Where did your anger go? Where did the sadness, the assertiveness, the hunger to stand out, or the wish to shine go? They slipped underground, gathering in the shadow, still alive, just unseen. The shadow is not some distant theory, it is active right now. Picture yourself as an iceberg. The tiny tip above the water is what people see. Your polite words, your planned behavior, the smile you put on in public. Below the surface is the vast mass of forbidden feelings and lonely needs. You may think the submerged mass is dormant, yet it leaks upward in subtle, sometimes destructive ways. When you feel uneasy around someone who speaks their mind, it can mean your own wish to speak up is trapped. When you attack a person who wants attention, it can be your buried longing to be noticed. When you envy another's success, you may be hiding the ambition you once felt before someone called it arrogance. You walk around carrying the weight of that hidden side, and even if nobody else sees it, you feel it in restless thoughts, sudden mood swings, or that unsettling sense that something inside is not in harmony. Ignoring the shadow does not calm it. Each year you pretend not to feel envy, rage, or fear. Those feelings find other doors. They turn into unexplained anxiety, repeated relationship conflicts, or a tiring pattern of quitting projects just before they flourish. The real question has never been whether you have a shadow. Everyone has one. The real question is how much it drives your life while you think you are steering the wheel.
So how does this unseen side trap you in loops that seem impossible to break? First, notice its most common disguise, projection.
Imagine you feel a strong dislike for a coworker but cannot name why. Sometimes that coworker simply mirrors a part of yourself you do not wish to admit. A person forced to bury their own competitive drive might feel harsh contempt toward anyone openly chasing a promotion. Someone afraid of their own aggression might detest people who state their opinions firmly. By projecting the unwanted quality onto someone else, the mind lets you attack it safely out there instead of facing it in here. Another sneaky tactic is self-sabotage. This is when you unconsciously set roadblocks along your path the moment progress becomes real. You delay the job application, skip practice sessions, oversleep on the morning of an interview, or pick partners who repeat the very wounds you swore you were done with. A hidden part of you either believes you do not deserve success, or it fears that succeeding will lead to unfamiliar territory where you might lose love, comfort, or identity. The result is a life that stalls in sight of each milestone. You might ask why these patterns keep winning even when you learn about them. It is because the shadow does not communicate in clear words. It speaks through sudden emotions, gut feelings, or urges that seem to come from nowhere. While you focus on conscious goals, the shadow draws power from neglected memories and feelings that were never processed. Many people put all their energy into willpower and positive thinking, yet ignore the undercurrent that keeps pulling them backward. That undercurrent is stronger than sheer will until you meet it on purpose. You may notice the shadow at work when you lash out at the people closest to you, then feel confused because you genuinely love them. You see it when you keep repeating the same apology to friends for always being late or flaking on plans, even though you promised to change. You see it when you fill every free minute with distractions because quiet moments risk bringing up thoughts you would rather keep buried. The energy locked in your shadow is like pressure under a lid. The longer it is ignored, the more forcefully it bursts out, sometimes in illness, sometimes in broken bonds, sometimes in dull resignation. The uncomfortable truth is that most of us never receive guidance on how to face those hidden pieces. Society praises bright moods and visible achievements, but rarely teaches how to sit with anger, shame, or sorrow without judging them. We end up stuffing heavy feelings out of sight, then wonder why life feels cramped. Jung saw that wholeness demands we reclaim what we sent away, not to justify bad behavior, but to notice and integrate it. The shadow holds raw material that, once recognized, can turn into creativity, courage, empathy, and clear direction. Awareness is the first crack of light. Each time you catch yourself overreacting, pause and ask, what might this emotion be protecting? What story about myself am I afraid to disturb? If someone else's behavior irritates you beyond reason, check whether that trait lives somewhere in you too. When you hear your inner critic mutter that success is for other people, trace that voice to the moment in childhood when you first believed it. Those reflections do not erase the shadow, but bring it into the open where you can respond rather than react. Taking responsibility for the shadow also means noticing self-sabotage as soon as it starts. When you catch yourself scrolling instead of working, recognize that part of you might fear the pressure of finishing. The cure is not harsh self-punishment, but gentle honesty. Admit the fear, remind yourself why the goal matters, then act anyway. Each small act of conscious choice sends a clear signal to your unconscious that the adult self is in charge now. None of this exploration is comfortable, and it is normal to feel resistance. The shadow will supply all kinds of arguments to keep the lid shut. I don't have time, it is pointless, I'm fine as I am. Yet sooner or later, unexplained sadness, anger, or stagnation will rise, and you will face the same choice. Keep denying or begin listening. Accepting the shadow does not turn you into someone negative or destructive. It frees the energy that was locked up fighting itself. Integrating that energy can boost creativity, deepen relationships, and give you a steady sense of authenticity no matter where you are. Our next step is to see how the shadow steers patterns so quietly that you can live decades without realizing it. By recognizing those patterns, you open the chance to stop calling them fate and start calling them choices. In the following part, we will uncover each subtle way the shadow keeps you circling the same tracks, and how observing those moves breaks the spell at last. The shadow acts like an unseen guard that blocks every exit from your familiar bubble, even when that bubble is filled with restlessness and low-grade misery. It does not stop after boxing you in, it also slips into your connections with other people. Think about how some friends never break free from a loop of draining partners, or how someone can leave one hurtful friendship only to fall into the same kind of bond again. That repetition is rarely an accident. Without noting it, we project old wounds onto new faces and look for scenes that confirm our oldest doubts. If rejection hides at the heart of your own shadow, you might feel strangely pulled toward people who keep you at arm's length. If deep insecurity sits there, you may line up with companions who tilt the scales so you stay unsure of your worth. The harsh truth is that the shadow can swallow your whole sense of who you are while you keep on thinking, that's just... You start accepting labels, unlucky, anxious by nature, never quite enough, when in reality, you are living under layers of stored experience you never chose to face. Given how much sway the shadow seems to hold, the pressing question is how to spot the moments it takes the wheel. How can you tell whether it is you steering or this darker side of the mind? In the next stretch, we will dig into the unmistakable signals that your shadow is pulling strings without your consent, and once those markers appear before your eyes, pretending it is not real becomes impossible. Music. If life feels glued to a pattern that keeps repeating, same worries, same dead ends, same heavy mood, your shadow may be calling the shots. But how do you know for certain? Which clues show that this hidden part of your psyche is shaping your choices and silently chipping away at your joy? The first loud clue is constant projection. Ever notice how certain individuals set you on edge far more than seems fair? Maybe a coworker's confidence makes your stomach twist, or a friend's tendency to take center stage sparks irritation you struggle to justify. Often, the shadow makes us notice in others what we rejected or muted in ourselves. A person who smothered their wish to be seen can carry a secret grudge against anyone who freely takes the spotlight. Someone taught to fear their own forcefulness may find direct, assertive people unnerving. Until you admit that the heat of that reaction is coming from inside, you will keep blaming everything outside for conflicts born within. A second sign is relentless self-sabotage. Have you been on the brink of crossing an important line, handing in that final draft, making the call that could change your career, only for things to crumble under mistakes you hardly ever make? It can feel like you dug your own pit and fell straight in. That happens because the shadow is protective of the status quo. If somewhere along the road you absorbed the story that you do not deserve big wins or lasting love, that script runs underneath all day, locating subtle ways to make sure you never outgrow the limits set back then. No wonder so many people pull the plug right as success appears on the horizon. A third symptom shows up in the endless pull toward hurtful relationships. If you keep dating partners who belittle you or sticking with friends who take more than they give, the shadow is likely repeating a scene from early life where those feelings first erupted. Someone rejected in childhood might recreate that experience over and over, chasing the same wound in different costumes. A person forced to bury anger may magnetize people who poke at that anger just so the feeling finally leaks out sideways. The pattern is painful, yet it is familiar, and familiarity tricks the nervous system into believing it is safe. Another big flashing light is the oversized fear of judgment. Does the thought of public critique make your chest tighten? Do you avoid sharing ideas because you dread looking foolish? That terror usually points to a shadow packed with unspoken shame. Perhaps long ago you were taught that mistakes were not tolerated, or that showing your true self meant risking exclusion. You grow into an adult who plays defense 24/7, eager to keep every move within a narrow margin of acceptability. That vigilance may feel current, but it is really a leftover alarm set to protect the child you once were. Then there is the quiet but brutal sign of emptiness. Many people reach a stage where, on paper, life looks fine. Steady income, a circle of friends, maybe even applause from others, yet a hollow space lingers in the pit of the stomach. That sense of something missing often stems from all the aspects of yourself you had to amputate to fit in. Real dreams, bold ambitions, raw authenticity were trimmed back so you would not rock the boat. Now, even when things appear smooth, you can feel the weight of what remains unexpressed. If these descriptions land close to home, do not take them as a verdict of doom. Recognizing the shadow is actually the first key to taking charge. The real danger is never about having a shadow. Everyone breathes with one. The danger grows when you insist on living as if it is not there. Yet a larger question sits on the horizon: what price do we pay if we keep brushing the shadow aside? What happens when suppressed material builds until it bursts? The shadow you pretend not to see does not fade. It gets heavier, stronger, harder to contain. Every year of denial lets it gather extra momentum, and sooner or later that buildup demands release. You might spend a decade telling yourself you are over an old anger, only to have it ignite one afternoon in traffic and wreck trust with a single outburst. You can push away desire after desire, but they may rebound as risky habits, compulsions, or secret binges that undermine your health. Traumas you stored in the basement of memory can reappear as anxiety attacks, racing heartbeats, or unexplained physical pain that medical tests cannot clarify. Do not imagine the shadow remains restricted to the private corners of your mind. It reshapes the outer world too. Ignore your terror of abandonment, and you could find yourself grasping at destructive bonds just to avoid an empty apartment at night. Shut out your buried envy, and you might sabotage your own projects anytime they start gaining attention. Each unacknowledged feeling reaches for expression, and if you refuse to look it in the eye, it will find back doors that lead bigger messes. One way the shadow leaks is through volcanic anger after days or years of low-grade tension. Maybe a partner forgets to run an errand, and suddenly a tidal wave of fury crashes through. The incident was only a spark. The fuel was everything unsaid before it. Addictions often rise as another channel. When desire for genuine passion is locked away, the nervous system still craves intensity, so it may latch on to substances, gambling, or overwork. Anything that provides a hit of feeling alive. The shadow also scripts subtle daily habits that chip away at progress. Picture someone who stays up too late scrolling feeds, telling themselves they deserve downtime, then complains there is never enough morning energy to chase bigger goals. That loop is not laziness, it is the shadow keeping life predictable. Comfort often disguises itself as routine discomfort you already know how to survive. Watch for how stories in your mind reinforce the pattern: people always leave, so I won't get close, or big dreams belong to others, not to me. These phrases are not mere thoughts. They are the voice of buried experiences, marking the borders of what feels possible. Till those limits are questioned, the same story repeats, and the same frustration grows. Some people try to outrun the shadow by changing scenery, new city, new job, new partner. But notice how the same feelings show up again? That is because the common denominator travels with you. True freedom does not come from rearranging outer pieces. It comes from turning the light inward and greeting what has waited all along. Jung did not say the shadow must be destroyed. He explained it must be integrated. You harness its energy rather than letting it erupt without control. When you choose to meet the shadow, the first step is honest observation. Make space to notice triggers rather than pushing them away. Write down moments when emotions surge beyond proportion. Track the self-talk that surfaces right before you procrastinate. Those notes become a map of the hidden territory. The point is not to judge what you find, but to recognize it. Over time, the very act of noticing disrupts the automatic chain between old wound and present action. Second, give those repressed parts a voice in safe ways, through writing, art, movement, or conversation with someone you trust. Expression deflates the pressure. You are not feeding negative energy, you are translating it so conscious awareness can understand its message. The shadow holds raw power. When understood, that power can fuel creativity, decisiveness, and compassion. Third, set small deliberate challenges that step outside your comfort fence. Each time you act against the old script, speaking up when you normally stay silent, accepting praise instead of deflecting it, you tell both brain and body a new story about what is allowed. Progress may feel shaky at first because the shadow will whisper that this is dangerous. Persist with kind firmness. Courage grows through repeat experiences of surviving what once felt impossible. Remember, the aim is not to become flawless. The aim is to live in fuller contact with every layer of yourself, so the energy once spent in hiding can move toward building, loving, and creating. The next segment will walk straight into the costs of long-term denial, and why letting the shadow run wild could turn into the biggest error of. When you push your own drive for achievement out of sight, the result often shows up as quiet sabotage at work. You might talk yourself out of stretching for a promotion, decide important projects are pointless halfway through, or assume that the people who do succeed simply have a gift you lack. Hide your real wants for long enough, and daily life starts to feel like eating food without taste. You go through the motions, but wonder why satisfaction never arrives. Yet the largest threat is not the nagging frustration or the stalled career. It is what happens if the shadow gathers so much strength that it finally seizes the controls. Think of someone you know who seems swallowed by bitterness. Every setback traced to someone else's failure. Every conversation loaded with silent heat. Every interaction conducted as though attack is the safest defense. That person did not emerge from the womb armed for battle. Instead, years of burying pain forged an inner force that eventually surged forward and took over. The outcome is a loop of resentment, fear, and repeated self-defeat that can last a lifetime. A related hazard is the hollowing sensation of depersonalization, that eerie experience of drifting inside your own body like a visitor instead of the owner. When large slices of your emotional landscape are cut away in an attempt to appear endlessly good, the mind loses critical pieces of its map. Darkness and light are part of the same terrain. Remove one and the whole picture blurs. Over time, the effort to delete any trace of unwanted emotion leaves a faint but constant ache, a suspicion that something important is missing, even if you cannot name it. Naturally, the next question presses in: how do you escape this spiral? How do you move from being the shadow's target to working with it on purpose? First, accept the core principle. Jung underscored again and again, integrating the shadow does not require destroying it. Waging war on the shadow is just more rejection by another name. Instead, the task is to admit it exists, then welcome the energy it holds back into circuit. Those hidden impulses contain courage, creativity, and raw vitality waiting for a conscious outlet. The starting move is a deliberate, honest act of recognition. Notice your strongest emotional jolts. When a situation sparks an outsized response, pause long enough to ask, what part of me is reflected here? If arrogance in another person grates on your nerves, might that person simply be displaying confidence you have kept on a tight leash? If you look down on people who chase recognition, could that judgment be covering a silenced wish in you to stand out but fearing you will be called greedy? The second move is to feel what was once stamped out. If you have spent years insisting you are never angry, practice sitting alone and admitting, yes, there is anger here and it has a message. Feeling does not mean acting it out on the nearest person. It means giving the emotion honest space inside. The shadow stays powerful only while you keep claiming those feelings are not yours. The moment you face them, authority shifts. Reflective writing helps anchor this stage. Open a notebook and write without filters. Which traits in yourself do you disapprove of and why? Which behaviors in other people spark instant criticism? And could those behaviors mirror something of yours? Which secret are you most terrified others might uncover? Putting these thoughts in black and white can sting, yet each line shines light on material that was once hidden, and anything brought into awareness becomes something you can respond to instead of something that silently directs you. Visualization and inner dialogue can also be surprisingly effective. Jung encouraged people to imagine the shadow as a separate figure and then converse with it. Close your eyes for a few minutes and let an image form. Maybe it is a younger version of yourself. Maybe it looks like a stranger. Maybe it shifts shapes every time you glance at it. Ask what it needs, what it fears, what it is trying to protect. Many discover the shadow is less a demon and more a worried guardian desperate to shield the self from old wounds. Listening to that voice can turn adversary into ally. Expect the process to unfold in stages rather than in a single burst of insight. You may recognize an urge or fear, work with it for a while, feel lighter, and then months later meet another layer. The essential shift is in attitude. Your dark corners are not beasts to cage, but reservoirs of life force that, once channeled, fuel your growth. Anger sharpened through awareness can power direct speech and set firm boundaries. Fear acknowledged can evolve into practical caution and wise planning. Desire accepted can pour into art, innovation, or devoted effort instead of escaping through compulsions. Knowing these steps sparks a final puzzle. Given the benefits, why do so few take the journey? Most people will never confront their shadow. They will rehearse the same complaints, act out the same quarrels, and pin the blame on luck, society, or the people around them. Unaware of the real source, they repeat familiar stories, nurse old hurts, and watch the same disappointments replay year after year. You have reached this point in the discussion, which means something inside you is tired of looping through patterns you do not fully understand. Part of you recognizes it is time to trade numbness for clarity, even if clarity brings temporary discomfort. The path is demanding because it strips away the comforting idea that all problems lie outside. It insists you admit the ways you helped build the cage. Such honesty can sting, yet it is also the only doorway to genuine freedom. Now you face a choice. You could let these ideas wash over you, nod in momentary agreement, and then slip back into routines engineered by the unconscious. Or you could start the work right where you are. Begin by naming one element of your shadow you have sensed but rarely spoken aloud. Notice the loop that keeps surfacing. Maybe a habit of quitting at the last mile. Maybe the urge to underplay achievements. Maybe the sharp envy that surfaces when a peer advances. Write it down. Say it out loud in a private room. Treat that admission as the first breath of air drawn by a long-submerged limb of your personality. If you feel brave, share it with someone you trust or in a space where open dialogue is encouraged. Speaking the hidden truth interrupts its hold. Remember that talking about the shadow is not an act of complaint, it is an act of ownership. That ownership transforms passive frustration into active learning. Each comment, each written line, each moment of reflection shifts the relationship between conscious mind and unconscious material. Stay alert to the shadow's tendency to slip back behind the curtain. After an initial wave of courage, it may whisper that the process is silly, that other tasks are more urgent, or that exploring these feelings is too risky. Recognize those whispers as defense mechanisms, old software intent on keeping things exactly as they were. Thank them for their concern, then carry on. The more times you choose awareness over avoidance, the weaker the old triggers become. In daily practice, small signals of integration will appear. You may notice yourself pausing before a habitual self-put down, then choosing different words. You may catch envy flicker and, instead of judging it, treat it as a clue toward a goal you truly value. You might sense anger rise, name it internally, and channel it into an assertive request rather than a sarcastic comment. These are modest outward adjustments, yet each one reclaims a bit more authorship over your life story. As this series continues, each new segment will dig into another corner of the human experience that often hides in plain sight. If you want the full picture, keep following along. Each piece builds on the last and offers practical angles for real-world change. Knowledge of the shadow is essential, but it is just one gear in a larger mechanism of self-understanding and intentional growth. Keep exploring, because the next idea might be the exact link you need to turn insight into lasting transformation. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next video. Until then, take care and goodbye.